Get ready to uncover truths and reality of today's politics. Here's your host, Lori Mills.
Welcome to another episode of Uncover California, where we delve into the underbelly of politics. And today we're going to be focused on cultural Marxism, which has infiltrated our country. I want to play a little trailer for you, and then we'll get to our guests.
I'm convinced that the American church has arrived at a significant moment of truth.
We are only 75, 80 years removed from three separate regimes that killed 60 to 70 million people intentionally.
The parallels with where the American church is now to where the German church stood in the face of the Nazi regime are unavoidable and grim.
Churches need to understand really what Marxism is, which is to destroy the church, to destroy the Word of God.
So if you capture the seminaries, you capture the pastors, you capture the laity, you capture the soul of the world.
Christianity is not just about saying Jesus loves you and then going to heaven one day, but that there's a war that's raging.
The church is weakening, which is why Marxism is ascendant in America today.
This is the hour of the American church.
Just wow. Wow, 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 wow. Every time I see this, I get the chills. The way that this movie came about was at a church, which is just amazing. And our church has been silent in the face of Marxism. So I want to introduce to you two producers of this movie, which is a must-see. You can see it now on Epic Times. I want to welcome Rachel Tash and Simone Alex. Thank you for coming in to Uncover California.
Thanks, Lori.
Okay, I'm going to let you tell your story. So, ladies, jump in, whoever wants to talk about how this film was created and what inspired you to do the film. But before we do that, let's talk about your backgrounds. Simone, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I have been in the entertainment industry for 30 years. I started off as an actress, and I acted and I auditioned and I worked and I slaved, and I just got to the point where I was ready to do something different and cast myself in my own projects. And so that took me on a journey of learning how to direct and produce and shoot and write. And that led me to up until the pandemic, or just prior to the pandemic, where I knew that this country was in trouble. And I felt that God was calling me to use my gifts, talents, and abilities to do something, and I didn't know what. And that led me into really producing content that is basically going to change the course of our country, hopefully, and really make a difference. So,
Rachel?
Yeah, Rachel Tash, and I started in the entertainment industry pretty early on, too. I have about 24-ish, 25-ish years experience. Most recently, I was at Sony Pictures Entertainment as a senior vice president of global marketing, where I handled all the film marketing of their films, various things. So I've come up through the studio side, and then prior to that, I was in production, worked at various agencies in LA. So really was in the Hollywood system for quite a long time. Simone and I go to the same church as you, Godspeed Calvary Chapel, where we have Pastor Rob McCoy as our pastor, who's just incredible man and really challenging people to get involved, get back into the ecclesia. And one morning, Eric Metaxas, who's a famous book author, he's written 40 books now, some have hit the New York Times bestsellers list, and a well-known speaker as well. He was at our church speaking on his latest book at the time, which was about a year and a half ago, called Letter to the American Church, obviously same name as the film. I was sitting in the front row that morning and I heard Eric speaking, and as he was speaking, he had no visuals. And I was like, wow, I really would love to see some photos of who Dietrich Bonhoeffer was, the church, Martin Niemöller, all these different historical figures, and he didn't have any of that. But what he spoke about was so powerful that I felt God calling me, saying, this book needs to be made into a film. Eric can only speak so many places around the country, so many churches in a year, and a film can go very far and wide. So after the service, I called Simone and I said, hey, I think, we should really think about making this book into a film. And she was on board. I got in touch with Eric and we pitched him. He right away got on board. And then from there, we went to a couple people for financing, one of them being Charlie Kirk at Turning Point, who we know has the largest youth organization, Republican youth organization in America. And he right away agreed, saw it, said he would fund it. And that's sort of how it got started. And went into production, got all these incredible people in the film, and a year later, the film is out. We came out on February 9th on Epic Times, their Epic TV station, part of Epic Times, and now we're streaming the film on our website, lettertotheamericanchurch.com, where you can see it. So it's been an incredible journey. The film is very powerful. It'll take you through what happened in 1930s Germany, through what Mao did in China, a little bit of Stalin, and then it jumps to modern day, and we can see how cultural Marxism has infected America and how the tactics that were used back then in the 30s are now here, just repackaged in a different way. But it has literally infected every part of our world here in America, our education, our corporations, our churches, everything. So we decided we wanted to make a stand and to wake people up and get them engaged going into this year's election.
Isn't it amazing how much comes out of Godspeak?
It is.
I ran for office because Rob McQuay said, what are you willing to give up for your country? And so I did. And I've met so many incredible people like you and like Siaka Masakwa. Yep. And just something is happening at that church. But we have seen over the last decade, I think, the church has died. They're afraid to speak out. They're afraid to stay open. And what you ladies have done, and you're completely correct when you say that this has infiltrated our country. We've got diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is nothing but a cancer. What do you think about what you're seeing in society today, Simone?
Well, our country's in a free fall. And we have been asleep at the switch. We've been preoccupied with the games on our phones and social media and what's coming out on Netflix and, what we can go out. Are we going to eat out? Are we going to eat on? I mean, we are so comfortable. It's not even funny. It's pretty disgusting, actually. And so people have been asleep. And it's truly the churches in Revelation when God speaks to the churches. You've been asleep. You're lukewarm. Wake up. And
I'll spit you out of my mouth.
I'll spit you out of my mouth. And lukewarm. It's like don't be hot or cold. Or be hot or cold. Don't be lukewarm. And we say be on one side of the fence or the other. You don't straddle the fence. The devil owns the fence. So I think that Rachel and I go through this cycle together, watching everything that's happened, even through the film. And then we had to there was so much happening that we literally had to say to each other, like, we have to stop adding things or we're going to continue because there's so much craziness that is happening. And I battle, and I think we both battle sort of like emotionally, mentally. I mean, seeing literally that our country's falling apart at the seams, but also in the midst of it, being Christians and being believers and having hope that God knows. He knows where we're at. He time and time again in the Old Testament, which is still relevant, it's there for a reason, time and time again, the Old Testament, countries, nations were saved by remnant. And it could be as small as Gideon's army, which was 300. And so, we have to take courage and take joy in the fact that, all we're doing is saying yes. You're saying yes. Rachel's saying yes. The people at Godspeak are saying yes. The people in this film are saying yes, that they're going to speak out. And there are a lot of people. This is, I want to say one thing that it's really embarrassing that a lot of non-believers are speaking out much louder about what's happening than believers.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah. I will say that, since this film, a lot of people have heard of it. A lot of non-Christians, anyone that has come to this country and escaped, communism or Marxism or socialism from another country has come here, and they will tell you, we see exactly the same thing happening here that we saw in Iran, that we saw in Cuba, that we saw in Venezuela, and countless other countries around the world. They said, just last week, I was talking to some Iranians, and they said, where do we go if America falls? There's nowhere left to go.
Right.
This is the last beacon of hope. And America does more than Europe times 9 around the world, giving and just, more inventors here, as Pastor Rob will say. And we have done so much more because this is a blessed country. We have to remember that, and we have to get engaged. The point of this film is to get people awake, off their couches, back engaged. This has been a long play, this communism and Marxism. It's been a 50-year play here in the country. They've slowly creeped into every facet of society, and now we are completely infiltrated, and people are feeling overwhelmed and they don't know what to do. Well, you don't have to be anyone special. You just have to talk to people, get involved, get to know who your local mayor is, who's your local, city council people, who's on your school board. Those people are affecting your day-to-day life. They're affecting policy and change in your community. Maybe be brave and run for office like you did, And if you lose, you don't give up. You pivot. You do something else. And
Here we are.
yes, and there is a remnant around this country, and there's a lot more people that are rising up and starting to realize how great and powerful this nation is, and it's worth saving. Mainstream media will lead you to believe that everything is lost, and it's just, I was listening today to a podcast about that this is a 30-front war on healthcare, on, our food, on our education, on, on
Every
the internet,
corporation.
everything. But it's like you cannot lose hope. You have to keep moving forward because, we have to save this country for the next generation and for other people, that want to come here and start a new life, the legal way. But there's just so much to be hopeful for. And I think that the country is, and the nation is starting to turn because we have swung way too far now to the left. So,
One thing that was, while Trump was in office, and it was one thing to me that I was like, wow, this is what they do to take down other countries, is when I started seeing statues being torn down.
yeah.
And I was like, if they remove our history, there's nothing to learn from. And then during COVID, that's one of the reasons I ran for office as well. I found out that they had taught my son about sex toys in school.
Yeah.
And while listening in on a Zoom class, I heard the teacher basically have the kids read congressional testimony by Democrats calling Republicans racist.
Yeah.
And I said, we've got a huge problem here. And since then, our borders are open. We've got military-aged men entering our country. We're heading in such a wrong direction. And even as a realtor, I had to take a diversity, equity, and inclusion class to maintain my license. And it's racism. Tell me what you think the biggest parallels are between what happened back then and what's happening now.
Well, easily censorship, 100%. It was easier back then. Hitler took control of the newspapers and radio. Bonhoeffer was turned off after Hitler became the chancellor. He was giving a radio address on what a Führer or a leader should be. He was literally censored and turned off. And it was very easy to whip up a frenzy with different articles and posters, and then to get all these fear tactics. And if you want to hop in, it's the same thing, but on a much grander scale now because of the internet and everything that we have, mainstream media has at our disposal to utilize these tactics.
Yeah, one thing that really struck me when we were going through all the Nazi footage and really writing out the story of how to explain this very clearly was that shortly after Hitler took office, there was a fire at the Reichstag, which is the German equivalent of the Capitol building. And that fire gave Hitler the reason to declare emergency powers in Germany. And although it's never been conclusively determined, all of the facts point towards that the Nazis were behind setting the fire, potentially hiring a patsy to set the fire and then take the fall for it. So when we look at something as simple as that, when you look at January 6th, or you look at COVID, and you look at all of the emergency powers that our leadership have executed and taken advantage of in any situation. I think recently Newsom, because there was so much rain, declared an emergency. And so now, I mean, the extent of the emergency powers are unbelievable. And that's just one parallel. I want to mention that another parallel is that Stalin, Hitler, and Mao all went after the youth. They all ingratiated the youth. Mao gave them meals, candy, and cash to ingratiate them when they were hungry. So you create this, you can create this society where everybody's hungry, and then you go after the youth, you go after the vulnerable. And so Mao indoctrinated the youth, and this is not a conspiracy theory,
No,
this is fact, that he really got the youth to turn on their parents, and in some cases murder their parents, because they were so convinced that their parents were the enemy. And you can see in California right now exactly that. You ship your kids off to school, they're there for a few years, all of a sudden you're starting to see them change dramatically. They get sassier with you, they get more angry with you, and then lo and behold, you're finding out that there's a bill that's passed that if the child, if the parent,
affirm them.
you don't affirm your child,
Their gender.
your child at 12 years old can decide to go off and be with the state. And so that is what it is. It's basically, and we have this in the film too, that the leadership believes that your children are their property. And this is what happened with Stalin, Hitler, Mao, is that the children became the property of the state. So when you're hearing people like Kamala Harris or Joe Biden saying they're not your kids, they're our kids, they're everybody's kids, that is not true. They are your kids. They are your kids. You make moral decisions for them. The state is not, or the schools or the teachers or the parents, they are in no authority morally to be making decisions for your children, but everything is flipped.
Yeah, I agree with that too, because the whole trans movement. And again, as an adult, if you choose, you want to wear a dress and you want to do surgical procedures on your own body, okay. But the fact that we've become a sanctuary state to bring children here, to transition them surgically, is so dangerous. And there seems to be this trend with the children now where it's become, to fit in, it's a cool thing to do. You can't change your race. And if you're this white oppressive person, then you can't change your sex now. And they've gotten such a hold, and these kids need to realize that we love you. We're not saying don't be trans, and we're not identifying you because we hate you. We actually love you and want to protect you. What are your thoughts on what's going on with the kids, Rachel?
I mean, it's a sick agenda right now that's happening. It is an agenda to break up the family. That's 100% what it is then to turn the kids over to the state and have the state raise them. It only takes one generation to change an entire country and to wipe out the history. And that's what they're really doing. And there is a massive, major attack on our kids. And a lot of it is coming through social media. They go off to school for 7 hours and you don't know what they're being taught. The books that are in the public schools, which are government funded, are horrific. There's people that go to school boards, like a pastor in our film, John Amanchuku, and he literally reads from the text that they have in the schools, and then they arrest him and pull him out of the school boards. He's like, but I'm just reading what your books are in your schools that you're teaching our kids. People need to wake up and be aware of what is going on, because they are trying to take our children and pull them away from us. And we as parents are very busy working and trying to, provide an income and food and all that, but we have to be engaged. We can no longer just pass our kids off and expect everything to be fine. You have to be aware. You have to go to these school board meetings. You have to read the curriculum. You have to get really in there. They're extremely sneaky. Something just happened recently with a book, Anne Frank. They snuck in some pages, basically saying some really explicit stuff, but it was buried in the book, and it was a new 2023 edition. So you see things like that happening.
Like what? Could you expound upon that? Because that's a first for me.
Yeah, I don't. It's very graphic, but it was deep in the book about some stuff they supposedly found from her diary about her wanting to do sexual things to her best friend, and very specifically talking about parts of her body, and then talking about other things. It was completely inappropriate, and it's being read at a 6th and 7th grade level. Kids should not be exposed to this. Younger and younger, they're being exposed to this, and then by saying that someone in history was this way, then they realize, oh, then it's been around for a long time and it's fine. And then they start to feel like it's fine to do this or be non-binary or do this or that. No, God created you man or woman, and that's it. There is no man that can have a kid, I'm sorry, it just does not exist. And Pastor Rob just talked about this last week. It cannot happen. It just doesn't happen in the way that we're created. So, as parents, we have to be on guard. I have 2 kids and I am very involved. You have to put down your phone. You have to carve out time. You have to educate your kids. You got to be the one to talk to them about this. Do not let the state educate your kids or tell them things. It is your job, and God holds us responsible to teach them and raise them and be stewards of their lives. So it's extremely important.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think this has been a long play, to quote Victor Marx in our film. This has been a long play to grab the family. I believe that the whole feminism movement was part of this play. If I can put my tinfoil hat on, there are books that are written about this that go back and basically show that if you get the mom working again and the dad's already working, then the children are more vulnerable to being taken by the state, as you can see now. And now you're in a situation where both parents are working, the kids are going to public school, they are being chaperoned by who knows who, God knows what, and you can't actually step away because your income level has gone to the place where you need both those incomes, and you're sort of trapped. And so, if you want to learn more and you really, really want to go in depth, I recommend reading Dr. James Lindsay's books. We had to study a lot of pre-study before we filmed these amazing guests in our film. And he's a mathematician.
Yeah, he's super smart.
He is really, I would say, the forerunner of understanding and explaining cultural Marxism, how it has infiltrated America. And essentially what it is, to your initial question, and I want to kind of say this because everybody's like, what's that? Marxism is so mixed up with communism and socialism. I think people are like, I don't understand, so I'm just not going to pay attention. So basically the tenet of it is that you can overthrow a society if you cause the oppressed group to grow and you get them to be essentially anarchists. They want to overthrow the government. So you go after the youth, you go after the marginalized, you go after the disenfranchised, and you basically say, you are oppressed, you need to do something about this, you need to fight back, you need to overthrow the man or the powers that be. And that's how you can destabilize and take over a country, by getting that proletariat essentially to rise up and take over. Now, back in, you've got the 30s and 40s and 50s, you could do that very easily in the East with economic, right? You've got the poor, and then you've got the different classes. But in the West, Antonio Gramsci wrote this too in Letters from Prison, that if you can get the groups, if you can't get the financially oppressed, then you get the marginalized groups, and then you get them to feel oppressed and want to rise up. So that it was a transition from basically economical oppression to cultural oppression. So that's where the switch happened. So then you have the identity politics and the LGBTQ. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is nothing more than
repackaging
socialism.
Mm-hmm. Well, they started with CRT, and then we all said CRT. No, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah,
they changed the definitions. And it's interesting, though, because, I was talking to Siaka about this, as a matter of fact. When I was a little girl growing up, my best friend was a girl named Tina Figueroa. We spent all our time together, and I really didn't see race. People were cool or they weren't cool. And what we're seeing today are they're putting people in boxes and
Yeah.
dividing the people.
It's actually racism what they're doing. Yes.
Yes.
My kids don't see that either. Until you start pointing those things out and making
Right.
it a bigger issue, then it becomes an issue. We as humans are not created that way. We don't see it that way, you know? So the left is creating this on purpose
Yeah.
to divide and to conquer us. A house divided, as it says in the Bible, cannot
Cannot stand.
So they're never going to come. Well, they are coming across right now, but you're not going to see tanks roll across our border. It's why would they do that when they can come in and take over mainstream media and break us down and keep us fighting against each other from within? That's
this-
how you destroy a nation.
Yeah, well, and at the same time, we've got an open border, and I
Yes.
don't know if you've seen the reporting, Ben
Yes.
Berquam down in the Darien Gap, but Anthony Blinken and our State Department have taken over our Panama base. They gave it to the UN. They're creating refugee camps in Guatemala
Yes.
and in Panama, and they are literally flying military-aged men into our country on our tax dollars.
Yes.
And there was a report this morning that I read that there's some judge that has decided that illegal immigrants can conceal and carry. This is a huge problem.
They can also be entering into potentially the military, but I think in California they can join the police force now, because with with everything that happened during the BLM, why would you want to be a cop anymore? You know, their hands were tied. They were being protested. They were being, stripped of their rights, all of that. Well, that's the whole point, is bring these people in, get the census numbers in, slowly replace us, cheaper jobs, all of it. We see it happening. Just last week, they caught a guy at the border who was Hezbollah, who said he was going to come in and he was going to create a bomb.
Right.
And I saw his picture. He was in his 20s, very young man. There's a great documentary. I don't know the name of it, but you can search it up on YouTube. It was two either friends or brothers that went and did the journey, starting down in Quito, which I think is in Chile. You start there, and they went all the way through the Darien Gap, came all the way up as an illegal, videotaped, hired mules, did the whole thing. Right as they were at Texas, getting ready to cross over, they got caught by the cartel, and they didn't pay, and they took them, they bagged them, they took them, they smashed their equipment. They had to do the journey again, but it's an incredible, this is a few years ago, it was all over the place back then. They show you step by step what's going on. It's horrific. It's a humanitarian crisis. They also show you all the different organizations involved that are funding this right now. This is a full-blown operation.
Oh, it is.
China has hotels all along the way. I mean, it's incredible. UN, we have Jewish organizations involved. There's so Doctors Without Borders. So many organizations are involved in bringing this crisis into our country.
And at the same time, we have 100,000 missing migrant children known to be sold into sex trafficking.
Yeah.
And what's going on right now is an organized takeover of the country. And people need to remember, maybe these people won't have voting rights, but when we do our census, all those people are counted in the census. And as of now, I believe they would gain 13 more congressional seats. And then to top it off, the Senate bill that the left wants to pass so much would give billions of dollars more to these NGOs that are trafficking the people, and it would codify, I think it's 1.8 million people a year that we would have to accept, though the people that are trying to come to the country legally are in the back of the line now.
Yeah. And so many people, I come from my family, I'm sure as your families have come over here. My grandmother, also, I wanted to make this point. Another point of why I wanted to make this movie was my grandmother was in concentration camps. She was a Holocaust survivor. Wow. She was in Poland. She was taken out of her school when she was 13, put in a boxcar and sent to Germany. And she was in 3 different concentration camps for the entire time for the war. When she was 19, when she was liberated, she went to England. She never saw her family again, never went back to Poland, and had to just start a new life. And she eventually came to America, came over, sponsored on a visa, got a job, and worked her tail off and created a life here, and went through the proper channels to become an American citizen. And that took an incredibly long time. And I'm not saying America shouldn't let immigrants in here.
My
but
husband's an immigrant.
You got to do it the right way and the legal way. It's not fair for the rest of us who are all working and have come across the right way and are paying taxes and doing everything the right way. We are funding these NGOs and all these crises all over.
Yeah, and I think that Christians have, there's Christians and sort of, I don't want to say liberals in general, but just people who are like, oh, love and peace and, let's love everyone and let's be, these people are poor and they're hungry and they, and I think that Christians have really taken scripture in this season and forever, but taken scripture and really twisted it around. That scripture is the moral law. You bring the moral law in, what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is evil, and you don't merge those, you don't blend those lines. You don't become a whole gray area where it's like, let everybody in and wear a mask and get the shot and do all these things that they wanted you to do and just take away your freedoms. That is not what our country was founded on. And we are truly in a war. And the other side, who is basically calling the people who are awake, they're doing this on purpose, calling us Christian nationalists, calling us right wing, calling us MAGA, which is now a derogatory term.
I think it's a great term.
And
what's wrong with making America great? When America's great, the rest of the world is great.
Right.
But they have twisted it because I think they're on the run. I think they're scared, and I think that there are so many people are waking up that they don't know what to do. So they're like, what are we going to do? We're going to call them Christian nationalists, and we're going to put people on NBC to tell them how scary they are and all of these things. And it's like, we love the Lord with all our heart, mind, and soul. And we want good. We want righteousness in this country. Sure, we love people, but we are opening up our borders and letting rapists in, murders in. I mean, they're going after your children. I mean, the stories that we hear every single day. The fentanyl is killing our youth. It is if people cannot see that this is an orchestrated takeover of our country, just get out of the fight.
Yeah, well, and again, with the exposure of the Twitter files, we now know for a fact the Department of Defense, the CIA, were running a psychological operation on the people. And I think we see that a lot in the mainstream media with an almost Operation Mockingbird, where they repeat the same quotes over and over and over again. And a prime example of that just happened with President Trump talking about the auto industry, and they called it a bloodbath.
Yes.
Yet if you go through all of their reporting, they say bloodbath all the time. And so I just want to make it clear to anybody watching, President Trump wasn't saying violence. He was saying that if China took over our auto industry in Mexico, it would be an economical bloodbath for the country, which is true.
Taken out of context yet again.
Yes, yet again. And it's just scary to me because there are people that believe this stuff. And I'm surprised that CNN or MSNBC are even in business anymore. But who's funding them? Because this messaging works in the favor of cultural Marxism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think that Operation Mockingbird really ever ended.
No, I don't either.
I think there is, you have to really do some research. And the hard part about doing research these days is that nobody's going to books. They're just going to Google and doing a Google search. Well,
and they're manipulated.
Google manipulates the algorithms. Again, the podcast I was listening to today, Dan Bongino goes into, and he has all the receipts and shows you the video of them saying that they were going to push down the fake news. Well, who decides who's fake news? They do.
Right.
They're going to push it down, and he was saying you have to get off Google. They are going, and Facebook, they are going to manipulate like crazy going into this election cycle. You've got to use different search engines because they will bury anything that we would consider patriotic or non-biased news sources. And you got to start going to sources like Citizen Free Press, Breitbart, Revolver. There's so many alternative sites out there that you can get accurate information, as well as on social media. You can follow what's happening with the border crisis and all that, and some great, people that are boots on the ground covering it all.
Yeah, and we were just talking the last couple of days because the film's been out for a month and a half, 6 weeks,
Yeah.
and we were talking about, okay, how long are people, usually a film drops and then you just move on to the next thing, but we were just kind of batting back and forth, how long is this thing going to play for, in terms of, because it's just been, we've had 30 to 40 requests per week for church screenings across the country. Over 500 churches have watched this film. I mean, we're one of the most popular films on Epoch TV, and I think probably even ever on Epoch TV, according to the numbers. But we were saying that we wanted to document history of what was happening, so that in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, no matter what happens, that this is a historical piece that people can look back on and see what had happened. And so constantly teaching a lesson. And I do want to say to the audience as well that you can stream the film on lettertotheamericanchurch.com, but you can also purchase a DVD, and the DVDs will last you. I mean, believe it or not, people are still buying DVDs and they're giving them out. I mean, we just heard this morning that someone just purchased 100 DVDs, and they're literally giving them to people to wake them up. So that is something you can keep with you. So if the internet shuts down or the electric, go
seriously.
Again, full tinfoil hat. But if it all shuts down, you still have this tangible thing that you can watch and play and learn and teach your kids and your grandkids.
Well, and again, I don't think it's unquestionable. We have a failing grid.
Yeah.
We've got people like Gavin Newsom basically destroying our oil industry.
Yep.
And that puts us in a very vulnerable place. So I don't think there's anything tinfoil hat about that. And people can look that up for themselves. Although you're right, I've actually put articles into Google, like a specific article. And all I get is left-wing articles.
Yeah.
It's so manipulated, and it is super scary. And actually, I was very sad to hear that Kennedy's actually picked some woman as his VP that was from Google. And I'm like, great, yeah. So,
Well, they don't even openly, they're just open about it. They don't even cover it up anymore. So many people have revealed, videos, Veritas O'Keefe, just so many people revealed that they're not even hiding what they're doing right now. They're very out in the open and telling you what they're doing and what is coming. Another great movie, Grid Down, Power Up,
Yeah.
I think, goes
Yeah.
into basically how, like you said, vulnerable our power system is and our grids are all over the country. So,
and how many people would die if it went down?
Exactly. We have become very, very dependent on all of these luxuries that we have here in America and have forgotten how to grow our own food, how to survive even without Google Maps or Apple Maps. Do you know how to even get around? I remember back in the day, we used to go to AAA and get a triptych, and you had a map or you had a Thomas guide here in California and LA to get around. Now, I don't think people could get from one end of LA to the other without their phone. Well, what happens if your phone turns off for 3 days? What are you going to do?
Right.
So people need to start thinking about just living again as a human and going back to our basic ways that we were, that the Pilgrims were, and how they survived and made it through all these hardships. And we have just gotten very soft as a society, and the rest of the world has seen that, and they see what it's like. So
I also want to clarify, I say tinfoil hat tongue in cheek, because I'm full on understanding what's going on, and I have done a heck of a lot of research. And that's one of the reasons she and I connected too, is that we understood what was going on even back when we met in 2021. I think it's been 3 years now. And you have to lock arms with like-minded people, and you have to, from a Christian perspective, a faith-based perspective, we are in a spiritual war.
Yeah.
And you have to find your tribe.
Yeah.
And I said to basically, Rachel and I are both exhausted from making the film and just running as fast as we can. And I said to my husband this morning, we were both just medical issues and just exhaustion and whatever, fatigue. And I said to him, I had spent some time with the Lord, and I felt like the Lord I said, Lord, I don't feel like I can get some rest, and I really need a vacation. I need rest. And I really felt like the Lord prompted me and said to me, we're in a war. when you're in a war, do you think that warriors go and they take a vacation in the middle of it? We're in the middle. And it wasn't a rebuke or it was just this gentle nudge of like, this is not the season for that. And I thought, oh boy, I'm going to have to, figure out how to get through this and, physically learn how to get through the next few years, because if it's anything like 2020, holy smokes,
And
we're in for a ride.
It's going to get worse.
Well, I think as we've seen Trump steamroll, each state one after another.
Because people are waking up.
Yeah, and I think people are tired. It doesn't matter if you're faith-based or not. People are tired of this. They're tired of going and paying an extra $20 to $30 for groceries. They're tired of paying high prices for gas. They're tired of all of it. And we can go back, and America can be great. We can be energy independent. We can have all of these things again. There's no reason. This country has the most natural resources than any other, country around. And it's like we need to go back to what made America great. And we can do that. We just need correct leadership in place.
I think that's why they compare, the far left compares Trump to Hitler, because Hitler wanted to make Germany great, right? He wanted to make Germany great, but it's a different deal. I mean, it's a whole different deal. If you read, I suggest reading Eric Metaxas's Bonhoeffer book. I'm in the middle of it right now, which is ironic that we made this film and Bonhoeffer was in it, and then I just didn't have the time to read it back then. But it really goes into a deeper understanding of Hitler's mindset of taking over. It's not the same thing. In fact, it's exactly the opposite.
Right.
And, it is taking, there's constant manipulation in perception, right? From the powers that be or the progressive left. And I'm not saying that there's not on the far right either, that there's not manipulation. But I'm just saying in this war, you have to know what is true and what is false. And really the scope of it is your time in the Word, understanding the Word, you knowing your relationship with the Lord and having a deep relationship with the Lord, but also having discernment. I don't know if it was Pastor Rob or someone that we both heard of, but we're not electing or voting for a pastor of the country.
Right.
Trump is not our pastor. He is not our savior. Is he the best political choice in this time?
Absolutely.
There's no other. There is no other.
Well, God uses us all as a tool, and he's a hammer. Today, executive privilege was broken up by the Biden administration, which is very much like a dictator. Peter Navarro went to jail for not testifying at the January 6th committee under the assumption of executive privilege. If a president cannot act with his staff and is going to be prosecuted for it, we're in trouble. Yeah. And there's been more political persecutions under this administration and zero under Trump. So who's the dictator?
Again, that's a tactic that Hitler did. He went after his political opponents, jailed them. Dachau was the first concentration camp where they were all sent. And then many more were built after that. So that's the first thing you do is if you want to win, Putin does it too. You just take out your political opponent. And then what's going back is that Putin even said that when he was doing the Tucker interview, if anyone didn't watch the whole thing, Tucker said, well, why don't you get this message out? And then he goes, because America owns the media. You think they're going to listen to my message and it's going to be amplified? No, that's what he's saying is that like American media is so distorted and censored and is so corrupt. So even, Putin understands that.
Yeah, and not that he's a good guy, because he certainly is not. Right. Yeah, but, it's interesting that you talk about that, too, because in 2011, I worked on the Ron Paul campaign, and that is when I learned that the media lied to the American people. It was the Iowa caucus. Ron Paul he was going after the Federal Reserve, and the military-industrial complex, and they didn't like that. And that night, NBC Nightly News stated, here are your candidates, and it was everybody but him, even though he was only 200 points behind Mitt Romney, and they did a complete media blackout on him. And I said, they're steering this election.
Yeah.
And back then, no one was awake. There was a very concise group of us that knew that the media lied. And now we are blessed because so many more have woken up. We just need the rest of them to wake up.
Yeah.
I wanted
we
to
only
say-
need a third, really. That's all we really need. You know,
Yeah.
God doesn't use huge numbers.
No.
He likes to have the odds very much stacked against us because then you can see what he does.
He gets the glory.
Yeah.
He says, no, we don't need 3,000. No, we don't need 1,000. We'll take 300 against
Yeah.
10,000.
Yeah, and even if you think of Lexington and Concord, you had 500 farmers at the bridge
Sure.
Yeah.
while everybody else sat home.
Yeah, we had, it was just like this monumental like effort to do this film, and we had like 4 people. It was like the 4 of us like
Yeah.
working night and day for 8 months. But what I wanted to say back with the open border is that I believe they are purposely shipping different groups of people to different states so that it will change the electoral college vote. So that it will,
Exactly.
and that is a strategic. We were coming back from filming in Phoenix, and we were going through security, and so Rachel was getting pat down in security in the Phoenix airport, which I was trying to video and laughing about. Meanwhile, you could see right just beyond her. I mean, she looked maybe Guatemalan. She was a very short, cute girl, couldn't have been more than 13, carrying a baby. And she was just alone being shepherded through by security. And she had a manila envelope. And this was before the borders were wide open. This was like back in summer. And we were like, but she's going right through, and Rachel
Right
is
through.
getting patted down. Like
Didn't
it was
speak
like
English.
it was
had someone with her. walking her.
bananas. And, I've seen shots, and I haven't seen it myself, but shots of them, doing, not storage facilities, but just they're housing them in airports and all over the place. And
Walmarts in Brownsville.
this is coming to your hometown. This is coming to your hometown, California, your hometown, Missouri, your hometown, Louisiana. This is pretty soon people are going to start to go, oh, I just thought that was on the news. I just thought that was social media.
Until their child is killed.
Exactly.
Until their child is killed.
Well, every town is becoming a border town now. We see them shipping Somalians up to Wisconsin. I mean, they're just putting people all over to change the demographics.
Yeah.
So it's very scary what's happening. We really need people to awaken, get involved, start talking, start building a strong community, because it really is a grassroots level that rises up within these states all over. And there's a lot more than we realize. It's just hard for everybody to communicate all around. But there is a strong remnant rising all over the country.
Okay, the dangerous part of all of this is we've got to weaponize DOJ.
Yeah.
We've got to weaponize CIA. They're doing
FBI.
things in America right now that they do to take down foreign governments. And people that aren't understanding this, I'm like, please wake up, because you can live your life the way you want to. But if this succeeds, we're not going to have a country.
No, FBI could come to your house if you post something as a joke on the internet and they don't
That
like
happened.
it, and they deem it as
happened in our film.
misinformation or whatever. They will come to your house. They could raid your house. Your whole life can be turned upside down. We've seen that happen with quite a few of the Godspeak members who were at J6. They were outside. They're going after the people outside now.
Yeah, there was a
Grandmothers
girl.
that
There
were
was
there
a
walking
girl.
around.
Yeah, there was a girl arrested today doing 4 months for being she touched a table or something.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
When Rachel and I were going into making this film and, talking about some of the other projects we've worked on and are working on to sort of wake people up, we had to really kind of talk to our families and kind of take a hard look at our lives and go, okay, we're stepping right into the limelight, calling these people out. And we had to really, you either step back and take care of protect your family and stay silent, just like people got really scared in Nazi Germany and so they didn't speak up, or do you just say, okay, this is the moment that God has created me for, and I'm going to step into the ring, and if I go on a list, I go on a list. If they show up at my door, they show up on my door. If I go to jail, I go to jail. It's the moment to be a Bonhoeffer. It's the moment to be, it's the moment to stand up, really. And people are, again, so comfortable and so scared. And, it's easier to stay in your prayer closet praying this all away than it is to step out of your prayer closet, go to a city council meeting, call them out, or go to, run for school board or do whatever it is that God's calling you to do. It's just time. And he's separating the wheat from the chaff, and he's separating the warriors from the lazy. And, everybody has a choice. Everybody who is watching this podcast has a choice. You can either stand up and fight in the way that God's calling you to do it, or you can lay down and just wait for Jesus to come back. And
Well, do you know what the scary thing is, though? The people that are not getting involved, they're coming for you too.
Yeah.
They're
There's only
coming
so
for
many
you,
people in
too.
the way, and then you're next. So
Like back in those days, like with Nazi Germany, they had the brown coats and all that, and even with Stalin and Mao, the people that stood by them and were silent, didn't they go after them first?
Well, that's what the quote in the film says. First they came for, the Jews, the trade unions, then they came for me, and there was nobody left to stand and help me. That was Martin Niemöller. He eventually came around, but it was a little too late. So it's like, if you don't realize that and come around now, there's not going to be anybody left to stand for you and protect you. If you don't get your community together, you don't get that strong group of people around you, and you start taking back your community, there's not going to be anything left.
yeah, I mean, I could put that quote in modern day. It's like, first they came for the Christian nationalists, and I wasn't a Christian nationalist, so I didn't speak up. And then they came for the MAGA, and I wasn't a MAGA, so I didn't speak up. And then they came for the left and
The middle,
or the middle or whatever. And there was nobody left to speak for me. There was nobody left to fight for me, to put it really in modern day terms. And I also want to say too that these oppressed groups are like, they're just pawns in this game.
Yeah.
The poor, like the
They will be eliminated,
LGBTQ
too.
community thinks that they are, victorious in this, or want to be victorious, and they're going to be victorious and they're going to win. They don't realize that they are being used.
They're marching for Hamas.
And they
Understand what would happen to them if they were to
Yeah.
go to the Middle East.
That is
They
the
would be
level-
murdered.
They would be
That
thrown
is
off
the
a
level
building.
of
Yeah.
that is how deep the indoctrination goes. That educated University of Berkeley, UC Davis graduates,
Harvard.
believe that they need to align themselves with yet another oppressed group, which is, again, oppression, proletariat, overthrow. The press has to band together. Well,
Raise their children to be suicide bombers. I mean, it's some sick stuff.
and that ideology is coming into the country in droves across the border as well.
Yeah, I can't believe that we're 20 years removed from 9/11, and yet we're seeing people actually protest for
Yeah.
a terrorist organization. Now, do I feel bad for the people of Palestine? But throw off Hamas. Stand with Israel and say, what, Hamas, you're out of here.
Well,
Turn them in.
I mean, the people are the pawns in any war, in Ukraine, in wherever. I mean, the people are the pawns. They are the pawns in the game.
And the
It's just a game.
expendables.
Yes.
They're expendable. And so, that is what also, the BLM and the whole race thing and all of that, it's just like, you are being used and you don't even see it. It is heartbreaking to me. And that's where I feel like the love of God creeps in. So like I was talking about how people misuse scripture as love your neighbor as yourself, and you have to do this, and twisting the scripture to make it all about like, let me embrace all of these things.
Well, they built a wall in the Bible.
Oh yeah. Oh
Many
yeah.
walls.
God,
Yes.
God was this idea of nations. I mean, that is God's idea, is nations, not our idea, right? But I feel like the love of God like creeps up in me for, because every year, like clockwork, in May, the small LGBT community in our city comes to city council demanding that the city do a proclamation that June will be Pride Month. And if you don't do it, and it's like the sound of like a broken record. If you don't do that, then I might kill myself, or my friend might kill myself or themselves, or my friend killed myself in Oxnard because they weren't accepted. And it's like, But then what they don't see is that they are so hungry for the state to affirm them that if the state affirms them, you see the ideology here, it's all the same. If the state only comes in to affirm you with a pride proclamation, then I'll be okay. And it's never okay because the ideology and as a Christian, that lifestyle will never fulfill you.
Right. Well, and I've got family members and friends that are gay that think that they've gone too far.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't want to know what you do in your bedroom. I really don't. It's none of my business, nor do I want to talk about my sexual exploitations with anybody else. It was interesting because my husband and I watched the making of We Are the World, USA for Africa recently. And there was such unity back then, and it just seems to be gone. I just don't know where we're going, girls.
Well, it goes back to the division, dividing people, and that's how you break up cultures. That's how you break up a nation, and that's the agenda right now, is to break up this nation. The whole world is watching what's going to happen here.
Right.
What is going to happen to America? Because they know if America falls, then the rest of the world falls.
Right.
It's funny you should say. It's funny you should bring that up because I actually watched that recently too.
Wasn't it good?
Where was this?
It's on YouTube, I think. But here's the thing: if you look at all those people who have now aged, right, who are in their 60s and 70s, like Bono and Sting, these are all globalists.
Well, now they are.
These are all. But I think that
Bono
again,
used to
this
be a
is-
Christian.
Yeah, way back.
Yeah. Yeah, but I've things about that. But what I wanted to say is that I think this has been a long play. I think it's been a long play, and we didn't know it was happening even back then, but even back in the 80s.
Well, ladies, we are starting to run out of time, believe it or not. I love talking to you, but we can talk out of here too. Let everybody know where they can see Letter to the American Church. Again, you guys, it is such an important film. Everybody needs to see it.
Yeah, I mean, literally, lettertheamericanchurch.com on our website. You can stream it there. We also have some merch that's rolling out, DVDs. You can buy Eric's book there. We'll have some hoodies and T-shirts soon, hats, all kinds of things. These are conversation starters. People go, what is Letter to the American Church? And then if you see the film, you can talk about the book, and you can share it that way too, which is an excellent way to get people awake and the word out. But go to our website, lettertheamericanchurch.com, for all information. You can sign up for your church to have a free screening there. There's tons of activation partners. You can learn about our cast, their organizations as well there.
And social media at Letter the American Church everywhere. We're probably most prolific on Instagram just because everything is so visual, but we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, not so much, but yeah, definitely follow us and keep abreast of what's going on and what we're doing.
Okay, and do you have social media where they can independently follow you as well?
Yeah, I'm at the Simone Alex, and that'll keep you abreast of things behind the scenes on our next projects and everything.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot going on.
And you?
Letter to the American Church, you can follow there. Yeah.
Okay, well, I thank you guys so much for coming on, and we'll be talking soon. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to Uncover California. I think it's a very important subject. To follow me, make sure you go to X at Lori Mills, the number 4CA42, and also follow uncovercali.com if you've got tips or stories you want to get out and to see previous broadcasts. And make sure you follow our brand new Rumble channel. We're no longer just on the radio. As you can see, we're now on video. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.